cannot see, those who know not that they are not, and those who live, blithe and free, sins forgotten, and thus absolved, a fresh dawn in their playground, while we live in shadows, swimming in ink. We are but a fragile dream, a singular weed, resisting, ever resisting, that iron dirt, that eternal law. Those who can't see, those who know not that they are not. Do you know? We are fellows. Those who know not that they are not.
Killing God is a common trope in JRPGs. Usually, it's accompanied by a fundamental shift in your understanding of a world and people, and used as a plot device to achieve a good ending or live happily ever after. But Expedition 33 uses it a little bit differently. And so, to add some context, let me talk about the first time that I personally encountered this trope, which was playing Tales of Symphonia back on the GameCube, because I think there's a lot of parallels between the way that story uses Killing God and the way Expedition 33 does. In Tales of Symphonia, your main mission follows Colette Brunel, the Chosen One. Her duty is to sacrifice herself to restore the world of Silverant, a cruel fate, and one that's more complicated than it first appears, because after you set out on your journey, you learn that Silverant is but one of two worlds, trapped in a vicious cycle where, when one waxes, the other wanes. If you were to complete your mission and restore Silverant, that would doom Tetheala and all of its inhabitants. So instead, you rebel against the system, fight the divine beings who laid out the laws of a world, and achieve the happy ending, saving both Silverant and Tetheala by killing God. Now admittedly, that's a little bit of an oversimplification, and maybe I'll get into more about Tales of Symphonia in a separate video. But I wanted to lay a little bit of a groundwork for how this trope is used in most JRPGs. And if you want to know more about the history of why killing God is such a common theme, I recommend watching this excellent video from Moon Channel. But Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is far from a traditional JRPG. For one thing, the developer is French, and for another, the game draws its inspiration from many other genres as well, such as Souls-likes or roguelikes. So what does it mean to kill God in Expedition 33? What happens if you do, and to actually get to that happy ending? Alright, before I get into that, I need to come clean, because I wasn't exactly honest about the story or the world in my review of the game. Instead, I kept up the facade that you're presented with when the game begins. You could say that, like Verso, I too guarded truth with lies, because I believe that this story is one best experienced if you go into it blind. So, if you have not yet completed Expedition 33, please turn this video off now and come back later. But if you have already completed the game, let's take some time to lift the curtain, explore Expedition 33's endings, examine the various members of the Dessendre family, their motivations, how they're portrayed throughout the game, and talk a little bit about how killing God comes in and the way the game subverts your expectations around that trope. Now I know you've been thinking, is this video something about Tenkiei? And well, it's true that Tenkiei has godlike powers. He may be the most powerful being in the world, but he's far too lazy to be this world's god. And so, especially at the start of the game, the closest being I can think of to a god of this world is the Paintress. She's always visible from her monolith, and every year, when she rises to paint a new number, disaster strikes as the Gamage takes more citizens. It seems almost as if this world's god is a malevolent one. But then again, even from the start, there are a few hints that things may not be as they seem. A continued thread throughout the game, where there's constant foreshadowing that you don't quite have enough information to put the pieces together. For example, yes, the Paintress is always at the base of a monolith, but she's not standing watch. She's not looking down upon Lumiere with contempt. She's hunched over, and when I finally reached the monolith and saw the Paintress up close, it almost seemed like she was crying. Maybe this is why Sophie expresses empathy for her at the start of the game.
Sometimes I feel sorry for her.
Who? The Paintress?
Look at her. She looks sad. Maybe she's a prisoner too. Stuck in the same cycle with us. Silly, huh?
Only you could choose empathy at a moment like this.
It's one of the few choices I can make.
I couldn't do it.
It's okay. You don't have to.
Now, I don't know about you, but by the time I reached the monolith for myself, I had my doubts. There were a lot of things about the paintress that just seemed off. Like when I talked to the small Borgian and completed his quest, his desire to grow large was so that he could see his mistress. But after you feed him, he says he sees the regent, not the mistress, and that the mistress made them, but the regent tends to them, implying that the paintress didn't create the Nevrons, but she is in some way protecting or helping them. This is of course confirmed through other dialogue chains. We learn that it's Clea who created the Nevrons, not the paintress. But outside of my suspicions, that intangible itch at the back of my mind, I didn't have much in the way of concrete evidence. I ran out of threads that I could pull on to learn why this was. And of course, by the time I reached the monolith, it was far too late for second thoughts. The entire game had been building towards killing the paintress, both from the side of the expeditions, Maelle wanting her revenge, and also Verso, wanting to bring peace to the paintress for his own reasons. And so regardless of the why, it felt like that was the only path forward. And within the monolith, you find a redux of several of the game's prior levels, spanning your journey from the meadows all the way through to a different version of Lumiere. The Nevrons here are also very different. They look broken, shot through with gold, much like the monolith itself, which reminds me of the Japanese art of kintsugi, repairing broken pottery using a mix of lacquer and precious metals. As you explore, there are several scenes that play out, showing a woman teaching her children to paint and teaching them to play the piano. With each scene, the world goes dark, fading to black and white as you see the fragments of a paintress's memories of her family. But again, there's no time to stop and think. There's no threads to puzzle out here. At this point, your goal is to kill the paintress so that she never paints death again. There's no time to wonder if that's the right thing to do, or if there's some consequence you're missing that's going to cause everything to go wrong. And so you reach the top of the monolith. You defeat the paintress. The golden number fades, and there's a moment of triumph. This is what everyone had been fighting for. All of those expeditions over the past 67 years. This is the reason the expedition motto was, for those who come after. Which makes Expedition 33 the last expedition. They succeeded where no one else has, and so now, there's only one thing to do. Triumphantly return to the city of Lumiere. Where of course, there aren't that many people left to greet them. And of those who are there, some immediately notice that Gustave hasn't returned. But in this moment of triumph, one person isn't celebrating. Verso sits alone, where he opens a letter from his sister, Alicia.
Brother, I tire of the conflicts and deceptions that plague our family and theirs. So, I entrust you with this letter. Whether you give it to her is up to you. I'm at peace with what's to come. When the time comes, I hope you will be too. Maelle, it's a strange feeling watching you with my brother, laughing and smiling, without the scars or the memories that afflict me. Alicia, as she was meant to be, not this painted version that I am. My family, a facsimile of yours, and this world, a mirror, painted by your mother, the paintress, to stave off her grief. Seeing your expedition through would plunge us all into the abyss. For in ridding the world of the paintress, you'd lose the sole force standing against the one who would erase us, the one who invokes the flowers of the gommage. An act of love, for he does love her. Your father. On her monolith, she paints a warning for us all, of the few she can save as her power wanes. wish for our families to thrive. Your family, however, believes only one can survive. But perhaps you'll find another way. You who have lived amongst us, perhaps you differ from your father and your sister, as I differ from mine. Your mother paints life, whilst your father, death. What will you paint?
And then it happens. A pulse erupts from the base of a monolith, and almost in the blink of an eye, the gamage takes everyone in Lumiere. Ciel closes her eyes in acceptance. After all, death's a friend, and if this is how it ends, maybe finally she can see Pierre again. Lune spins endlessly, her mind racing. For a why, a what, a how. What does this mean? What is the world? Why is the gamage taking people after the paintress was defeated? And Maelle erupts into golden petals. JRPGs often take place in worlds locked in some sort of cruel cycle. Usually, you rebel against the system, you kill God, and this breaks the cycle, allowing you to achieve a happy ending. But that is not the case in Expedition 33. Yes, the world of the canvas was trapped in a cruel cycle. Aline chose to paint the canvas, to bring her memories, or maybe more accurately her grief, back to life. And Renoir chose to paint death, in an attempt to save the woman he loves. But here, when you kill God, when you break the cycle, you spell doom for the canvas's inhabitants. Which leaves one question: what would Maelle paint? A question that's best answered after we get to know a few more people. And so now, let's take a look at each of the members of the Dessendre family, and then the Lumierans themselves, to get a better understanding and set the stage before examining each of the game's endings in a bit more detail, to hopefully puzzle out what it says about the game, the world, and any larger message that Expedition 33 is trying to tell. So first up, Aline, the paintress, the one who started all of this. Aline's second representation within the game is the Axon Sirène, painted by Renoir, also known as She Who Paints Wonder. And to me, this is because Sirène encompasses the beauty and enchanting power that Aline has. The ability to create is truly wondrous, and it certainly appears as if Aline is exceptionally talented as a paintress. So to her, the act of creation might be as simple as child's play. But at the same time, I think it's best to take this interpretation, along with each of the other axons, with a grain of salt. Yes, Sirène's dance is enchanting, as shown by the way she draws in the various members of the expedition, and how her attacks have the charm effect. But is this truly how Renoir sees Aline? Or is his perspective maybe a little bit tainted by his grief, just as her painting of him is similarly bitter? After all, at one time, she saved him. He became lost in the canvas, and she was his way out. Regardless, I can't help but feel a little bit sad watching Sirène dance endlessly without an audience, trapped within these crumbling ruins, knowing that at the top of the monolith, Aline is trapped in a prison of her own grief, and beneath the monolith, Renoir is trapped in a prison of his, locked in a battle with Aline. Now, despite Aline being so pivotal to the story, we rarely get her perspective on the events. Usually, it's through a flashback, through an encounter with a paintress, or through someone else's perspective on her. But one of the few times that we do, in her own words, is through her journal entry, found in a greenhouse at the top of a mansion.
His little grin. So proud of his latest creation. But at least those memories remain. What hurts more are the memories unmade. The conversations we'll never have. The time we'll never spend. I want rage to consume me. Anything to fill the hollow. But rage won't come. And I just float in an endless nothingness. The person I cannot be around is Alicia. Her pain is a broken mirror, the shards reflecting back tenfold, and every moment with her the cuts deepen and I feel myself unraveling. I know what he'll say, but this is the first time I've felt any surcease. For a few moments a day, my heart beats again.
I think this journal entry goes a long way to explain why the painted version of Alicia remains disfigured and unable to speak, despite the rest of them having the ability to heal any injury at will, in addition to their immortality. Because to Aline, looking at or conceptualizing Alicia was just far too painful. Why go this far? Why recreate the world within Verso's canvas? Well, I think the answer can be seen through a conversation with a fading man in Lumiere, a glimpse into what I believe is Renoir's memories. The fading man talks about death, and the woman in this conversation, I'm pretty sure, is Aline. He talks about how she was saddened by death, not because of its finality, but because of all the works of art she'd never get to experience. And so, for someone who holds art so close, I think it's only natural that she'd turn to art in her darkest hour, that she would paint into existence a world where she could remember her son, a world that ultimately she becomes lost in, trapped both by her grief and the struggle with Renoir, as the world slowly deteriorates around both of them. And so maybe now's a good time to talk about him next, because in many ways he's just as important to the game's story as the paintress, where if she is the benevolent god of the world, he could almost be seen as the wrathful god, though maybe that's not an accurate portrayal of his personality. Then we have Renoir, named after the real-world artist of the same name. If Aline is the paintress, then Renoir is definitely the painter. And the first time we meet him is through his painted version. So, the image of Renoir as created by Aline within her grief. And this version of Renoir serves as the game's main antagonist throughout the early acts. He is equal parts terrifying and enigmatic. And I think this is one of the best antagonist introductions I've experienced in a while. It's all about show, don't tell.
You're old. How did you survive the Gommage? Which expedition are you from? Fall back!
And so through that short scene, Renoir is not only introduced as the game's antagonist, but he is absolutely terrifying. A force so far beyond the power of the expeditioners that he is able to annihilate them without expending any effort. Now later on, you learn that he's driven by one goal to the exclusion of all else: protect his family. A goal that's shared by the real version of Renoir. There are certainly a lot of similarities to the way the painted version wipes out Expedition 33 at the start to protect the paintress, and the way the real one, trapped beneath the monolith, is continually casting the Gommage each year in an attempt to save Aline. It is of course the real Renoir that we learn painted the axons: Sirene, Visages, Reacher, each a metaphor for the different members of the Dessendre family. There's an element of truth to each, but as people are complex, I found all of them to be wrong in subtly different ways versus how the characters portray themselves. Though of course I can't really verify the painted version of Verso in comparison to Visage's, because I don't know the real Verso. We only see him in spare moments during the story. Yes, Visage's does share the same proclivity for lies, but seems to lack that sense of purpose. Sirène is enchanting, but I think more of a reflection of Renoir himself being enchanted by Aline than of how she would see herself, and Reacher's a small child trapped within a giant shell, which the game's dialogue presents as Renoir's hope that Alicia will flourish despite her injuries. Yet it's not Reacher's heart that goes even higher, but the structure around it, almost as if he doesn't trust her to flourish on her own. Now, it is through the lens of the painted Renoir that we see the desire to protect family taken to its most extreme.
You've lived more than a lifetime. It's time to let her go.
A lifetime. A lifetime with my family torn apart. No. I want my family back.
Yes, year after year, Renoir wiped out expedition after expedition, so that none of them stood a chance of threatening the Paintress. As such, he stands as the game's main antagonist, terrifying Maelle, killing Gustave, and at every major inflection point for the story, presenting an obstacle that seems insurmountable. This culminates near the top of a monolith, when you are one step short of confronting the Paintress, and of course, the painting of Renoir stands in your way.
We're taking her down.
She's not the only one who grieves. The pain of losing you, she made me inherit it. Punishment, perhaps, for not being there when it mattered. I refuse to lose my son.
That son was a stranger.
But you're not. You're not.
You lost me years ago, and I lost you.
So you leave us no choice. Tell me, how are you different from her in doing this?
I'm tired.
So trust me. We are your family.
Family is complicated.
If saving you means losing you, then so be it.
In this conversation, the painted Renoir is frank and honest. He's willing to sacrifice his relationship with Verso forever, if that means saving him. Because if the Paintress is defeated, the petals of a gamage will eventually take everyone, including the painted family when the canvas itself is erased. That is the one thing that he cannot abide by, and also the one difference that defines him as opposed to the real Renoir. So now's a good time to introduce the man himself, who you meet near the end of the game. And when he's introduced, Maelle remarks that the painted version was rather unflattering, and the real version is much warmer. And you do see a bit of his warmth when he's first introduced. But again, he's driven to protect his family, to save them at all costs. So, this drives the conflict during the game's third act.
Papa!
Alicia. You're safe. I thought I told you to stay home.
Technically, my body's at home.
Some of Aline's finest work. I regret that it caused you so much pain. What Aline did was unfair to you most of all. Please, accept the Dessendre family's apologies. I know it seems absurd to offer oblivion as recompense, but perhaps that's the outcome we both desire.
What?
I'm proud of you. Getting your mother out of the canvas was not easy. Once we erase the canvas, we won't have to worry anymore.
She's home now. Why?
You know your mother. Verso painted this canvas. It contains a piece of his soul. She'll never willingly part with it.
No.
For the sake of the living, we must part with the dead.
No, Papa. See, I hid the canvas.
She will always find it. This is our only opportunity, while she's too sick from her prolonged descent into the canvas to return.
No. Papa. Papa, please. This is Verso's only canvas. You can't destroy the last piece of him that we have. This is my home now. You can't just decide...
Your home? After all that with your mother, you want to stay?
You know how little remains of my life outside.
Alicia, you'll die. You've already been here longer than you should.
But...
No. Look at me, I said no. I am not letting my daughter risk her life. Alicia.
No, Mama. I'm not going to lose myself if I stay.
I know full well you will, and I am not doing this again!
No!
This isn't someone who simply desires for things to continue on as they are forever. In fact, quite the opposite. He desperately wants something to change. He's haunted by the fact that on that day he wasn't present. He couldn't save the real Verso, and now he must do everything he can to save Aline and Alicia. During the conflict, the expedition tries to convince him, tries to get Renoir to change his mind.
Your friends speak truth, and it changes nothing. You can hate me, but that's a choice I must make. As your father, I must look out for you, especially when you can't look out for yourself.
You treat me as if I'm still 5!
I treat you as if the shadow from the worst day of our lives is going to suffocate you and take you from us too!
Why wouldn't it matter if everything they said is true or not? Well, because he's not acting from a place of facts or logic, and he knows it. He's acting from his heart, from a place of emotion. And to his end, he does have one more trick up his sleeve during their confrontation. Collapse from exhaustion, as she tries to remain within the canvas. This clearly has a huge effect on Verso, who sees Aline's pain and the way it compounds his own, as someone who's painted to live the life of another. It's Renoir's actions here that ultimately lead to Verso's ending. But I can't help but wonder if Renoir knows that. Is this his final gambit? Is this why, during this confrontation, he finally relents and chooses to trust Alicia? Or does he trust her because as her father, he must? After all, how can he support his daughter if he doesn't give her that most basic of courtesies?
I've lost too much. Papa, see? I've lost so much.
We both lost so much.
Papa, I don't want to lose you either. I'm not leaving you forever. Just a little longer.
I want to trust you, but...
You can.
Keep the light on for you. I hope you find peace. Hold on, to each other.
Now personally, I think the charitable interpretation here is the right one, because unlike the painted counterpart, the real Renoir deeply values each member of his family and his relationship with them. After all, the gamage is an act of love, and he doesn't want to lose Alicia in his attempts to save her. But the way he goes about this is far from the best. Like CL said, he's blinded by grief. And beyond that, he's also driven by his own experiences with the canvas. There was a time when he lost himself, and he would have died, except he was saved by Aline, a much more skilled paintress. And I think that fear, the fear of losing the rest of his family, is also what was driving him forward so blindly and emotionally, in a way that was tearing his family apart just as much as their grief was. Despite this, I can't help but feel sorry for Renoir. I can't help but empathize with him, because he's a flawed human, doing what he thinks is best in the moment. And at the end of the day, if you do the right thing for selfish reasons, it is still the right thing to do. And if the game has any greater message, I think it's that erasing the canvas, facing reality, and for each of the family members to confront their grief directly is what they should be doing. It is the right thing. Before I get into why though, I want to talk a little bit about the members of the canvas themselves, the ones who are certainly in the most unfair situation, because they get no choice over their fate. And also a little bit about Clea, because her role in the story is quite interesting. You could say Clea is Renoir's accomplice in all this. She painted the Nevrons to give him an advantage in his conflict with Aline, so that he could ultimately erase the canvas. And this is also why the Nevrons trap chroma when they kill expeditioners, so that it doesn't return to the canvas and can't be used for more painting. Now Claire makes her stance clear, that she doesn't really care about the conflict between her parents, but she requires Renoir's help in her war against the writers as she tries to avenge Verso. Again, she's channeling her grief, but I'm not sure it's any healthier than anyone else. So while Clea is not featured prominently within the story, appearing only in a couple of side quests and in the short interlude before Chapter 3, her impacts are felt throughout as you're constantly encountering Nevrons. And when very younger, Clea often painted these nightmares to haunt Verso, which at the time could be nothing but a harmless prank on a sibling, but later her actions reveal there may be a crueler streak in her nature. Because Clea treats all of these painted creations not as sentient beings living their own lives, but as mere tools to be used. And she expresses particular disdain towards the way her parents represent her. She sends Simon to kill the Axon Renoir painted of her, leaving old Lumiere littered with massive blades. Then she sent Simon to use his considerable power to kill the paintress, leading him on with a promise of her painted copy, despite knowing that she already repainted that facsimile to endlessly manufacture more Nevrons for the battle. Just listen to how she speaks here.
My love, these foes are beneath you. You who have fought heaven and earth and subdued giants. To find me, to free me from her grasp. Would you fall now to the likes of them? While your oath remains unfulfilled, rise. Your enemies await.
Among all the painters, only Clea has this ability to paint over another's creation, and she does this with an utter lack of care for their essence, which makes her absolutely terrifying. And this repainting causes them immense pain, as seen by the painted version of Clea, who, as soon as she regains the ability to act of her own accord, seeks oblivion by using the Nevrons around her. All of the painted creations can think and feel and act, just like any real human. But Clea doesn't give them that dignity. She never acknowledges their humanity. instead using them as tools while she focuses on her war against the Riders. And even here, she's not that simple, because in the Battle Tower she has some advice for her younger sister Alicia, delivered after you beat floor 33 of a Battle Tower. She urges Alicia to make her own decisions, and to not be ruled by her guilt and grief of losing Verso, to not let her parents' grief control her life. So at the end of the day, it's hard to tell how much of Clea's attitude towards the painted creations is her own, and how much of it is simply the mask of her grief. Early on, Tenkiei, the Gestrals, and the Grandis stood out to me, because they seemed out of place. They're a bit too whimsical in comparison to the rest of the world, and that's because they're the original inhabitants of the canvas. There's a sense of childlike wonder to these beings, which makes perfect sense because Verso created this world when he was a child. And I love this, because it explains so many things that felt like plot holes earlier in the game, like how Tenkiei is incredibly powerful, but seemingly unable to solve any real problems, and why he's totally incapable of doing anything without his rocks, which he keeps losing. Well, he needs to lose them to go on more adventures with Verso, and I suspect a lot of those adventures were just finding those rocks. Plus, if he solved all of Verso's problems, it wouldn't be much of an adventure. Then you have the Gestrals. They love fighting, they're unaffected by the gamage, and they speak in half gibberish. Visually, they resemble mannequins used for figure drawing, but with a paintbrush for hair. I can almost see it now. Little Verso, after a long day of learning how to play the piano or paint, travels to the canvas and brings his mannequins alive to go through their own fantastical adventures. But even the hardy Gestrals are struggling in this post-fracture world, with only a small portion of them surviving while the remainder patiently wait for reincarnation. And despite this, none of the doom and gloom about the world dampens their upbeat spirit or love of fighting. But the most notable of the original inhabitants are Minoko and Tenkiei, Verso's adventuring companions. Both know the truth, and they choose to support him anyway. They never reveal his secrets, and they stand by him to the bitter end. Well, okay, I guess Minoko took a little bit of convincing, but once Verso mentioned there'd be a lot of fighting, he was on board pretty quickly. And lastly, you have the Lumierans and the Expeditioners, Aline's creations. They are by far dealt the most unfair hand in all of this. Unlike the Gestrals, they cannot reincarnate. Unlike the Painted Family, they aren't immortal. And what can mortals do in a battle between gods? Well, they can fight their hardest, no matter how futile it seems, with each expedition laying the groundwork for the next. Gustave creates the Lumina Converter, allowing them to harness chroma in new ways. He's kind, sincere, and driven by his hope for the future, alongside a desire to protect his sister Maelle. Ciel acts as the group's mediator, stepping in when there's conflict between the various party members. She has her own demons to contend with, but she's always willing to lend an ear to a friend in need. On the other hand, if I had to describe Lune, I'd use one phrase: insatiable curiosity. She's driven to understand everything about the Nevrons, the paintress, and the world itself. Throughout the game, this puts her in conflict with Verso, and I think the ending is especially cruel to her, because she's left knowing there's an entire world out there that she'd never be able to see or explore. And so if anyone deserves to decide their own fate, it is the members of Expedition 33. They never asked to be caught in this war known as the Fracture, where godlike beings wield the power of creation to make and unmake without a thought for the people who inhabit this world of wonder that they painted into existence. And I think little Verso would want them to thrive as well. But ultimately, they live within the canvas, so the decision is out of their hands. And so with that, the stage is set and the actors are ready. It's time to talk about the game's two endings and examine them through the lens of the characters they represent. In one case, Maelle or Alicia, and in the other case, the painted version of Verso. Maelle, or Alicia, is the most complex character in the game, in part because she's two people in one. So I apologize in advance if this section doesn't do her justice, but I tried my best. So let's start with a painted Alicia, who, despite her immortality, is scarred and unable to speak. I think this is because, in her grief, Aline blames Alicia for Verso's death. So I can only imagine that she created the painted Alicia without the ability to heal these wounds despite her immortality. All of the painted Dessendres know the reality of the canvas, but it's Alicia who expresses it through her poem, the same one you heard at the start of this video. She's continually observing Maelle, who in turn is haunted by visions she doesn't understand, and a sense of familiarity that's just beyond her grasp. But I found that the most interesting aspect of painted Alicia is her ability to freeze chroma, giving her time and interactions that seem to take place outside of a regular flow of the canvas. Maybe this is a reflection of the fact that, out of all the characters, she is the only one who seems to be able to see past her grief, giving her a rare clarity among the Dessendre family. But much like Cassandra from Greek myth, all of her insight falls on deaf ears, and her messages never quite get to the person who needs to hear them. But then we have Maelle, the real Alicia, who's painted over and reborn into the canvas, who's haunted by an aching familiarity at every turn.
I see why you like throwing rocks.
You've been quiet since you saw those people.
It felt like they knew me. Like, actually knew me.
This sounds like torture, to feel like someone else knows you, or knows something about you that you don't. Worse yet, it's someone who's hostile. To have strangers treat you as familiar, after they kill dozens of people you grew up with, leaving you with no idea why. Yes, even here in the canvas, Maelle can't escape from grief.
Death out here's not like death in Lumiere, is it? I thought I was used to losing people. Life of a foster child, right? But not like that. On the beach, that man.
Yeah, I know. Nevrons we were prepared for, but not. And now we've finally found other survivors, and it's... You know, that's the insidious thing about the Gommage. It's predictable, almost gentle. It makes Lumiere complacent and accepting, but... the Gommage is equally violent than death. Death is just as final.
But, unlike the Dessendres, Maelle handles her grief very differently. In fact, it's a source of her growth. The best example of this is after the painted Renoir kills Gustave.
I'm really sorry I didn't arrive sooner. He was your brother?
Something like that.
Losing family is difficult.
I know. I know what you're going to say. You want to offer your condolences. You want to say something comforting. But I don't need it. I've had enough condolences. I've lost so many families now. I just need... Can you please go?
Even in a world full of loss, some losses hit way harder. But she pushes on, and replaces that grief with steely resolve, even gaining a new skill, Gustave's Homage, something that deals lightning damage instead of her normal physical or fire, her way of carrying his memory with her, even in battle. And Maelle's presence also influences the monolith when the expedition gets there, even before she remembers who she is. Not only can she sense some of the paintress's memories, but near the top you come across a grave, marked by the mask of Visage. Clearly, this is a grave for Verso. And yet, Gustave's arm is resting on top. There are quite a few parallels between Alicia losing Verso and Maelle losing Gustave. Alicia trusted the writers, which led to Verso's death. After beating the Lampmaster, Maelle wanted to throw some rocks, at which point the painted Renoir appears. The difference is in how they process their grief. Alicia turns her hatred inward, blaming herself for Verso's death.
After the fire, you wanted me to find new joy in life. And I tried. But I couldn't. Verso died because of me. How do I get from that to joy?
And this destroys her, transforming her into a shell of herself even more so than the fire did. But Maelle turns her hatred outward, channeling it towards the painted Renoir.
We only need to incapacitate him.
We'll find a way to kill him.
She has an enemy to confront, and with the help of Expedition 33, and a bit of yen from the real Renoir, she has the power to kill him. So, throughout the game's story, Maelle undergoes quite a lot of character growth, and learns to deal with her grief. But after the Paintress is defeated, the pulse from the monolith burns away Aline's creations, and she remembers her life as Alicia. At first, she acts like this didn't affect her.
Alicia.
Actually, I prefer Maelle.
I think I do too. But I'm not really Verso, and you're not really Maelle, are you?
You're not Verso, no. You look and sound just like him, but you're you. I'm still Maelle, though.
But in truth, it leads to some big changes. For example, now she warmly embraces Renoir. Gone is the fear or hesitation of a painted Renoir who haunted her throughout the early portions of the game, because she has a lifetime of memories where she knows Renoir simply as Papa. But at the same time, the guilt of knowing that she's the reason Verso died returns. In some ways, I think Alicia's memories undoes a lot of Maelle's character growth. And when you can repaint reality within the canvas, it's far too tempting to use that power instead of accepting loss, processing your grief, and moving on. Because it is Alicia's grief that drives her forward on this new quest, to restore the canvas, and ultimately, this is what leads to Maelle's ending. Which is maybe why neither of the game's endings quite lead to the outcome the painted Alicia hoped for.
If you could grow old, would you find a reason to smile?
The thing started off happy enough, but the longer the scene progresses, the more uncomfortable it gets. To me, one of the most telling things about this scene is Verso's appearance. He has no scar. His scar was something he got from a battle against the painted version of Renoir. It was one of the few things about himself that the painted Verso was able to choose, one of the few times in which he had agency. But here, it's gone, because this isn't the painted version of Verso created by Aline. It's a new one, painted by Maelle to fulfill her wish to see him play. Yet again, a member of the Dessendre family painted Verso to assuage their own grief. This is just a continuation of a cycle, a dream from which Maelle may never wake, and a dream that for the painted Verso is yet another unending nightmare. I'm sure Aline's world looked similarly idyllic when it was first painted. Lumierans living with Grandis, watching Gestrels engage in friendly duels. But that can't last. And the scene's end makes me think it's only a matter of time before Alicia fades away within the canvas, or only a matter of time before the cycle of grief continues. Renoir enters the canvas, creating another fracture in an attempt to save his daughter. And yet again, the canvas's inhabitants get caught in the middle, trapped in a world where their gods continue to grieve. The first time you meet Verso is through the image of a fading boy. This is Verso as he was when he painted the canvas, a fragment of his soul. And the fading boy is confused by the fracture, because he created a world of wonder, inhabited by the Gestrels, the Grandis, and Esquier, a place to bring joy, something so far from the horrors of a fracture and the war the Dessendres caused through their grief. He's also the only character who consistently treats all the inhabitants of the canvas as their own people, wishing them to have the agency to live their lives in peace. But there's another version of Verso that we spend a lot more time with.
It's been a while. Stay out of this. You chose to walk away. You don't get to come back now and interfere.
You've lived more than a lifetime. It's time to let her go.
A lifetime. A lifetime with my family torn apart. No. I want my family back.
It's not your family. But she is.
You would use her.
She chose to come. I didn't make the rules between you two. Hey. You all right? It's okay. I'll handle things here. Get back to your friends. Go.
So that's it. You've set us down this path. But are you ready for the consequences?
She'll never paint again.
This version is Verso as painted by Aline, a recreation of her son through her grief-stricken memories. And throughout the early parts of the game, he follows Maelle, keeping her safe. Eventually, he intervenes to stop painted Renoir, but he intervenes for selfish reasons, to complete his goal of saving Aline. The third interpretation of Verso that we see is the Axon Visage, And I think out of all the Axons, Renoir's interpretation of Verso is the most accurate, at least of a version we know. He who guards truth with lies. Throughout the story, time and time again, Verso lies to the expedition. And there's always a kernel of truth within his lies, but it's a subtle misdirection away from his own goal. For example, telling the expedition that the painted Renoir is only trying to protect his immortality, while conveniently leaving out the fact that killing the paintress will doom all the inhabitants of the canvas.
If you want to reach the monolith, the best path is through the quarry up north.
Who are you? And where did you get that expedition uniform?
Strange way to say thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't save your friend. I'm wearing an expedition uniform because I, too, am an expeditioner.
What? What do you mean you're an... I've never seen you before.
First expedition. Expedition 0.
Expedition 0? But how are you alive and not...
Old? I don't know exactly, but some of us stopped aging and were not affected by the Gamage.
Some of you? Like the man on the cliff?
Renoir, our commander.
Why? Why did he massacre our team? How could he turn on his own people?
He believes his immortality is a gift from the paintress. Killing her would kill him too, and he enjoys living forever.
And you don't?
Burying everyone you know while you live on can weigh you down a bit.
For the most part, he does this masterfully, but there are a few times where the mask slips.
Why can't you accept who you are?
Here, for example, Maelle is the one under attack, but Verso yells for Alicia to move, because he knows Maelle is Alicia. And so, time and time again, Verso's lies drive the story forward, pushing the expedition by giving them new goals, or ways to overcome their obstacles, such as the barrier in front of a paintress. Some of these are lies of necessity. After all, how do you tell someone they aren't real? I think this is why, out of everyone in the expedition, Ciel is able to understand Verso the best. Even after he betrays them so that he can kill the paintress and eject Aline from the canvas, Ciel understands, because she would have done the same for her family. There's one point, though, where you as the player get to decide if Verso tells the truth or not. This is during the Level 7 relationship conversation, where Maelle asks Verso if he let Gustav die intentionally. You can lie and say no, or tell the truth and say yes.
I need to ask you something.
What?
You wouldn't lie to me, right?
I think we're well past that.
On the cliff. Gustav,
What is it?
did you let Renoir kill Gustav? Could you have saved him?
Yes. I'm sorry.
Why?
I was afraid. If you found out about the canvas and he was there, you would refuse to help me send Maman home.
So you let him die?
I did. I should have told you everything sooner, but I couldn't take any chances.
Thanks. For telling me the truth.
And if you lie here, the implication is that you create an irreparable rift between Verso and Maelle. Because at this point, she can bring Gustav back. It's not the fact that he died that's the problem. It's the fact that Verso continues to lie. Now, despite his guarded approach, Verso has a kind side too. As such, he often gets dragged into helping the other members of Expedition 33 with their problems. Most of this is explored through their relationship quests. Verso helps Ciel overcome her fear of water. He helps Lune discover her parents' fate. And he helps Minoko bring Noko back, and even takes on Golgra to do it. And I think this is part of why, for so long, Verso avoided the expeditions. because time and time again, he would get involved and begin to care, and then have to watch the people around him die. Or he would get involved, and people would learn his secrets, and he would watch the people around him slowly turn on him. The curse of immortality. But I also think this kindness is a small glimpse of a real Verso. After all, Verso is the sort of person who sacrifices himself to save his sister. It's clear that the painted version of Verso cares deeply about his family, both the real Dessendres and the painted ones, minus painted Renoir, of course. This is one of the driving factors behind his ending, as he sees what entering the canvas does to Aline. But this also means he sometimes acts in unusual ways. For example, when he sees Maelle struggling to repaint her friends after regaining her memories, he watches for a bit, but ultimately intervenes.
Painting isn't about verisimilitude, it's about essence. Truth of who they are. Your father made the axles, right?
She who plays with wonder, he who guards truth with lies.
They're the essence of your mother and your brother.
Arguably, this runs counter to his goal of saving the Dessendres, as it allows Alicia to continue her escape within the canvas. And arguably, it runs counter to Verso's own goals. He doesn't want to be burdened by Verso's memories anymore, and now that she knows how to paint, she could paint him as well. And yet, almost in spite of himself, he helps. And because he cares, some of the hardest moments for Verso involve his painted family, and the resolution to their storylines. He has to watch Clea paint endless Nevrons, and then when she gets a moment of awareness, she responds by using the Nevrons to end her existence. Then, when he meets up with a painted version of Alicia on top of Reacher, Alicia stops time, has a conversation with Maelle, and then disappears, taken by the petals of a gommage.
I'm sorry. It's what she wanted. I owed her that much. We owed her that much. I honored her wishes. That's something neither you nor Renoir ever did. And not Maman either.
I didn't get to say goodbye. You didn't wait. You didn't give me a chance to persuade her.
She knew what she wanted. You wouldn't have been able to sway her.
She's not you. You don't know that. I know her better than you do. But you didn't even give me the chance to try. You just erased her.
Verso.
You've lost two brothers. You know what it's like to lose your sibling and never get the chance to say goodbye. You painters, you just do what you want. You don't care how it affects the rest of us.
I do care. I know you're hurting, but the person who made that decision wasn't me. It was her. Would have been wrong to deny her just so you could try and talk her out of her decision.
She's the last of my family. I have no one left now.
You have me. You have us.
Maelle, I wasn't ready.
Don't understand. You were ready when you set Papa free. You expected that he would erase the canvas and everyone in it. Isn't that the same thing?
It's different. It's different. Why did she do that?
You know why. But you're right. I should have thought of you. I should have given you a chance to say goodbye. I'm truly sorry, Verso.
At least she's free now.
I think both of these events affect him deeply, and ultimately drive towards his ending. Drive towards the way he handles the resolution of the canvas. Because if a canvas is a mirror, then Verso is the reflection you see when you look into it. The Dessendre family's grief made manifest by their guilt. Ultimately, what he does is unfair to the other denizens of the canvas, because he aligns himself with the Dessendres over them. But this whole thing is unfair to him most of all. Think about it. If you had the memories of someone else's life and someone else's family instead of your own, would it not be natural to want to help them overcome their grief? Renoir offers him oblivion, and I think Verso would have gladly taken him up on this offer, had Maelle not pushed him to come with her. And this reminded me of the fact that there's very few points in time where any of the painted creations truly control their own destiny. The Dessendres can always re-enter the canvas if they're ejected. They can bring the dead back to life by repainting them, or, in Clea's case, paint over a creation, bending it to her will. There's only one way to have true agency. There's only one thing a painted being can do. They can erase the canvas.
It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay, huh? You've got this incredible power to paint. You'll never have to suffer a life you don't want. You're okay. You're okay. You're okay. I will miss you guys.
miroir du temps, nos histoires s'alignent dans le creux de nos mains. Deux mondes se dessinent, l'un peint de rêve où le chagrin s'efface, l'autre nu et réel où notre deuil prend place. Dans le dessin, toile vierge, horizon lointain, peignons ensemble les couleurs de demain, au clair obscur, œuvres infinies. Chaque pas trace la route d'une vie. Au lendemain non écrit, sous les étoiles où tout commence, rien ne finit. Dans le dessin.
So with that, the canvas is erased, and Verso is finally able to find peace. The Dessendre family must finally confront their grief. Effectively, this means everyone within the canvas dies. I think SK and Minoko are fine with how things end. After all, they were painted to be Verso's companions until the bitter end. And I think Minoko at least knew this was going to happen. Ciel also seems to be pretty accepting in her typical manner. Because if the canvas is erased, she'll be with Pierre, even if that means sharing oblivion with him. Yet Lune remains defiant, refusing to cross into the space between worlds. For someone brimming with such curiosity, I would imagine that knowing there's a vast world out there that you never get to see, explore, or experience must be torture for her. Worse so, knowing that a being from that world, or being inspired by that world, is going to decide her fate, and there's nothing she can do about it. But erasing the canvas does have the desired effect, as the scene closes on the Dessendre family, all gathered together at Verso's grave. Finally, everyone is confronting their grief, and it does seem like the relationships between each of the family members are finally mending. Aline is standing with Renoir, and even Claire puts her war aside, at least for the moment. This is what Renoir wanted, why he worked so tirelessly to erase the canvas and save his family. And you could definitely argue that this is the best outcome for him, Clea, and Aline. But I can't help but wonder, what is the best outcome for Alicia? The way she lingers at the grave, and the way that she sees the members of Expedition 33, her friends from the canvas, gives me hope that she's also able to move forward, but at long last, she can live a life filled with wonder in the worlds she's going to go on to create. Personally, I prefer this ending to the alternative. And yes, there's a part of me that wishes there had been a way to save both the canvas and the Dessendres, much like the painted Alicia wishes. And I think it's intentional that there's not. Because in both endings, the canvas functions as a mirror, reflecting the painter or paintress who created it. This is why the canvas was originally a place of joy and wonder, and why it became so twisted by the Dessendre family's grief. There's no way to get a happy ending for everyone, because life keeps forcing cruel choices. Because the same people continue their cycle of grief, look for an escape, and learn nothing from the past. And so yes, I can totally understand why some people aren't satisfied by the game's endings, and I think that's the point. But personally, I really love the way the game ends, and I appreciate that the ending is partially unsatisfying. It's one of the things that, for me, took the game from great to all-time great, because if the game had a satisfying ending, it would be the Dessendres leaving the canvas and allowing the world to continue, with a family returning to visit the world from time to time. But if this was possible, the fracture wouldn't have happened, and we wouldn't be here. You can't wrap everything up in a neat little bow, just like every other game does. So instead, it reminded me of a Bloody Baron's quest from Witcher 3, where you have several well-written but morally grey characters, a brutally dangerous world, and ultimately no perfect fairy tale ending. And I think that's why the Bloody Baron's quest in particular, out of all the quests in that game, has remained so memorable to me, even though the game came out a decade ago. And it's why, ever since Expedition 33 came out, I've been thinking about the game and the story. It's why I made this video. Because in the real world, not every story can have a happy ending. This video took a long time to make. I spent over a month collecting clips, writing my script, rewriting because I realized I missed something, or just going back because there was a part that I wanted to change. For example, in the original version, the endings had their own section, but I felt it was more fitting to talk about them when I talked about the characters they related to. And during that time, I watched a lot of VaatiVidya, Max Durant, and Moon Channel for inspiration on how to structure this. And I'm hoping that paid off, though if it didn't, let me know down in the comments. Also, if you haven't already done so, I highly recommend playing through Expedition 33 a second time, because there are so many subtle clues and small hints that build towards the big reveal about the nature of the world and the Dessendre family, that it's a joy to go through and have those little aha moments when you realize, oh yeah, that weird scene back at the end of Act 1 was a clue about Aline and Renoir fighting. In short, I put a lot of time into this and a lot of thought into this, because Expedition 33 is amazing. And so, to everyone who worked on the game, thank you for creating something so special. And before I go, a big thanks to everyone who made it to the end of the video. I'm glad you've enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one. And remember, tomorrow comes.